Hey everybody, it's Heather Vickery. Have you taken our listener survey yet? If not, pause the podcast, head on over to www.vickeryandco.com/survey. It'll take you 2 or 3 minutes, and it really helps me get a better understanding of who my listeners are. We want to make sure we're giving you what you're looking for and having a collaborative effort here on this show. Everyone who participates gets to have a say in the charity we are supporting via the survey. And also, if you choose to leave your name and email address, you will be entered to win a $100 Visa gift card, as well as some other great prizes that are specific to the show. Again, that's www.vickeryandco.com/survey. And the survey will be live until August 12th. So be sure to check it out, share it with your friends. They have to be listeners, of course. And thanks so much for the support. Okay, here's the show.
Stubborn, identity, and joy.
You are listening to The Brave Files, real stories from people living courageously. You can listen to the show anywhere you enjoy podcasts, and we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on Apple Podcasts. It really does make a difference, and we appreciate it. Now here's your host, Heather Vickery.
Welcome to The Brave Files. Today, I am super excited to bring an extraordinary young lady to the show. As an infant, Cassandra Bumpus was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. The years took a toll on her, and her life by the age of 25 included wearing an oxygen mask at full time, and her lungs began to completely stop functioning, which landed her on a double lung transplant list. Cassandra is here to share her story of perseverance and survival with us. Cassandra, welcome to The Brave Files.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I've really been looking forward to this. Your story is so extraordinary to me. And I happen to have had a friend growing up in high school who also had cystic fibrosis. And I remember very clearly some of the things that you've shared with me in his life. So I have a little personal soft spot for this. But can you tell us, I do want to hear more of your story, but before we get started too far, can you tell us what cystic fibrosis is?
Yeah, for sure. So CF is a genetic condition, and it is there's no cure, and it primarily affects the lungs, but it can also affect the pancreas and just has kind of a plethora, if you want to say, or a plethora of other side effects and effects on the body. But basically, mostly the lungs, and it basically makes us create more of what we call mucus in the lungs. So everybody has that in their lungs. That's a normal part of your body, or normal thing that your lungs produce. But for people with CF, it's produced in a greater amount, and it is more sticky, attracts more bugs, if you want to say, and then can cause more infections. And then it's progressive as well. So it's kind of inevitable that as you get older, it takes more and more to try to keep your lungs healthy. And eventually, it's just not possible to breathe well with your own lungs anymore.
And that's consistent, right? For everybody who experiences at some point, if you have cystic fibrosis, that's going to happen.
Yes, exactly. It's just an inevitable part of the disease and the progression of the disease. Yeah.
Is there typically an age where you either don't make it, or as you did, you end up on oxygen and then the transplant list?
Right. It can vary. Like, I have heard stories of people being, in their 30s or 40s, say, and ending up with transplant at that point. It seems more so to be like the most common kind of seems to be, in your 20s or maybe early 30s that it is when you get to that point. But there are outliers, of course, where it's, they've been able to make it longer, or sometimes, people end up in high school needing that kind of a transplant.
Okay. Thank you so much for that in-depth description. So tell us a little bit about you and what it was like growing up with this, and then how things progressed for you.
Yeah, sure. So I was diagnosed at 6.5 months as an infant, like you said. And we, at that point, my parents were told like that my life expectancy would be very short. Like, I forget what they were told. like I might live to be 30 or something like that.
Wow.
And basically they told my parents kind of not to do their own research on it, because it was kind of at a point when a lot of newer information, newer research about the disease was coming out. So a lot of the things that were already out there were kind of outdated, and they didn't really want my parents to kind of read that stuff and get even more scared than they already were, I'm sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I grew up, my parents tried to give me a fairly normal childhood, friends, sports, going to school, those kinds of things. I did have to take enzymes, they're called, before all my meals, because CF people don't digest food properly. So that was something I had to do. And then a daily routine, basically, of physiotherapy to try to get me to cough and get rid of the mucus buildup in my lungs, and other inhaled antibiotics and inhaled medications. So I would do a routine. I would get up earlier than all my friends and my brother before school, do a routine before school of medications and treatments, and then again before bed. And that was just a constant in my life from kind of the time I can remember until transplant, basically, was to have that as part of my daily routine. So then I did a lot of speaking growing up, like kind of trying to raise awareness and working with different foundations.
Oh, I love that. I didn't realize
so that was something that I really credit my parents with getting involved in and helping me get involved in at an early age. I grew up doing that. And then, just kind of as I got older, the disease progressed, and slowly my lung function numbers, which is something they measure, at all my checkups, those started to drop. And then I got to the point where I would have been, I think, 23, and I'm 25 now, and I was on oxygen full time, 24/7. And I was in pretty bad shape, and I couldn't do too much even with the oxygen. So we ended up, and I had some complications. My CO2 level in my system, in my body, started to creep up to higher levels than normal.
So that's your carbon monoxide level, right?
Yes. Yeah. And so that became quite scary. And then I was hospitalized about probably 2 weeks or so after I had agreed to be listed on the transplant list. I was hospitalized.
So what was that? Like, you originally, when you first agreed for the transplant, something you thought you could wait on at home, but that wasn't
right.
Right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Generally, the ideal scenario is that you want to be able to kind of live at home with support, obviously, from, whoever you're living with, be it friends, family, etc. Ideally, you want to live at home until you get the call, right?
Okay.
And so that was kind of, what you want to happen. For me, that was not the case. I was in pretty rough shape already. And so, about 2 weeks after I was listed, I ended up in hospital. My CO2 levels were very high. They said that for a normal, like a typical person, that they would have been unconscious.
Oh, wow. And how was it that you weren't?
So it's the body's crazy ability to adapt. Because my CO2 level had been rising kind of consistently over the last probably couple months, my body was adapting to that. And so when it got to be that high, I was still able to I was still conscious, but not feeling great at all, obviously. Yeah, so I was, my parents kind of rushed me to emergency. At that point, I was living with them in the small town, like my hometown. They took me to emergency, and then from there, I was flown into the university hospital in the province that I'm from here in Canada, in Saskatchewan. And I stayed there for a couple weeks, and then eventually I was flown from there by air ambulance to the University of Alberta Hospital in Edmonton, Canada. And they have a pretty big lung transplant center and lung transplant team of doctors and things there. So that it was always the plan to be transplanted there anyway. That was, okay. I had met the doctors, that was like set up basically. So I ended up spending a couple months just in hospital waiting, essentially, because they were too scared to release me from hospital.
Now, prior to this, what had you been doing? Had you been in school? Were you working? What was happening?
No. So prior to this, I had gone to university for a couple of years after high school, when I was still feeling well enough to do so. University wasn't really my thing, so that didn't work out.
All right.
Yeah, not for everybody. So I stopped that, and then I had been working. And then kind of as I got more sick, I kind of dropped down to just working a part-time job, just because, I'm always wanting, like, I always kind of need something to do, busy, right? So just to give me something to do, get out of the house kind of thing. So I was working part-time, and then eventually that also got to the point where, okay, like, I'm not feeling good at work. I'm always short of breath, and I'm getting major headaches because I'm low on oxygen and things like this. So working is not going to be feasible anymore, right?
So you're in the hospital for 2 months before you get a good match. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. But what do you do for 2 months in the hospital?
Yeah, yes. Well, my parents would switch off with me. Like, one of them would spend, 2 weeks with me, and then they'd switch off. And my mom would come and spend 2 weeks with me, and just so that they could have a break too. And also, my parents are working full time and that kind of thing. So they switched back and forth with me. So I always kind of had somebody with me. I had a couple of friends in Edmonton that would come visit me. I was in contact with my now husband, I guess. I hadn't talked about him yet.
I know. I had that question coming up, but we can bring it in right now. So we can just, while this was happening, as you were starting to get more and more sick, how did you meet your now husband?
Yeah, so I actually, I had been writing and starting to post it online, just as a way to kind of...
Writing and posting what online? Your journey with cystic fibrosis?
Yeah, okay. Just any kind of personal essay type posts or shorter poems, or, kind of a variety of things. And some of my photography as well, I think I had been posting. And it was just a creative outlet. It was something for me to do because I wasn't able to work, that kind of thing. And he happened across a couple of my posts and started reading through them. And he resonated with them because he also has cystic fibrosis. And he has a couple of siblings that have cystic fibrosis.
Oh, wow. That feels unusual to me. Typically, it's only one child in a family.
Yeah, it can be. He comes from a very big family, though. So there were a couple of them that have CF. And so he resonated with kind of what I'd been writing, and he liked it enough to reach out and compliment me on it. And then we kind of started emailing back and forth, and then it kind of progressed to, Skype calls and phone calls and et cetera.
Nice.
And so he was in Tennessee at the time. That's where he was living.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
that's far away from where you were in Alberta.
Yeah.
Is it
exactly.
safe for two people with cystic fibrosis to be in the same space?
Right. So it is not recommended.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it is not recommended. Obviously, when there's families, when there's, siblings that have CF, it's kind of a difficult, tricky situation, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's not recommended. And the reason for that, I'll just kind of quickly touch on for people, is because your immune system isn't as great as a typical person, and because your lungs are more susceptible to infections, et cetera, you can basically spread different infections back and forth between you. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And so, no, it is not recommended. And that was not something we ever took lightly. That was something we struggled with a lot in making the decision to kind of continue the relationship down the path it was going, and to eventually meet up in person, et cetera, and get to the point where we are now, obviously, where we're married and living together.
Yeah. And during this time, I'm curious, what was your thought process? Were you like, I'm just waiting it out, I'm going to get this transplant, I'm going to be fine? Or what was going through your mind? What were you thinking your future might look like?
Right. So I had a hard time with the transplant because it's a big, scary thing.
Yeah.
And, I think can be a perception out there that, well, you have sick lungs, so you're going to get brand new lungs, and, everything is great after that. But it's not really the case. Like, transplant really isn't a cure for CF. I still have cystic fibrosis. And then transplant itself comes with a ton of complications and risks and all that kind of stuff, because obviously, those organs that are inside your body are not your body's organs.
Right.
So that creates some issues.
Reject them, all of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my kind of, I guess, thought process was, I had a hard time coming to terms with, this is my only option. I don't have, and, people try to frame it as, well, you have a choice. You can say yes or no if we have lungs available for you and stuff. But it's really, I just kind of want to mention, it's really not a choice.
Right. If you don't want to die,
yeah, exactly. So there's not really a choice there. But yeah, so I had a hard time with the transplant because I was so fearful of all of the risks and potential complications, and kind of once you do it, there's no, like, I can't go back, right? Like this is it now. I'm stuck with these, and if they don't work, then I'm in big trouble.
And so you waited 2 months, and I don't know how long it takes typically for transplants for, the right donor to show up, but you needed 2 lungs from the same person, right?
Yep.
2 matching lungs.
Yeah. And so for me, actually, I was very lucky, if you want to call it that, or fortunate, or whatever you want to say, because they expected me to be waiting quite a while, longer than I did, for lungs. And the reason for that is because I'm fairly small. I'm about 5'2", and I weigh, like around 115 or so. Like, I'm pretty petite. And it is typically harder to find lungs to fit in a petite frame than it is to find lungs to fit in, the average person's size.
Right.
And so that was something that they told us, that we kind of knew going in, that I might be waiting longer because those are fewer, harder to come by, essentially.
Okay. And there was something particularly interesting about the lungs you received.
Yeah. And so actually, I'll just kind of walk you through, if I can, that morning that...
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Okay. So my dad and I were together at the hospital at that point. My mom was back home and my brother was back home. And it was in the morning, and we'd been there, like we said, probably 2 months, or almost 2 months. And the doctors came in and said that they had found a set of lungs for me. And they said, they kind of gave me some details. It was a non-smoker. The donor was a non-smoker. They had all the kind of medical details about the donor.
Right.
And so they listed all those off for me and my dad. And then they said the kind of catch, or the big thing we wanted to explain to you, or to go over with you, is that the donor is positive for hepatitis C. And, right away I was kind of like, well, then why are we talking about this?
Right. Because do you want to explain for anyone who might not know what Hep C is? And
yeah, so hepatitis C is something that, people can have it, and it can take years to affect you, but it affects your liver, and that can happen, years after you've been infected with it. It can cause different problems to do with your liver. And it's something that you generally, like, sometimes if you're going, if you're traveling, you'll get vaccinated for that.
Right. How do you contract Hep C? Do you know?
Yeah, I believe there is a couple ways to contract it. And I think some of them have to do with, you see those commercials on TV about non-sterile instruments at the spa, or, things like that. Also from...
That's a terrifying thought.
Yeah, it is. Also from, like, use of needles.
Right. Okay. So often it's associated with drug use.
Yes, it definitely can be. Yeah.
I knew. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So they told you that these lungs were infected with Hep C.
Yes. Yeah. And so basically they explained that this was a very new thing that they don't typically, and hadn't typically in recent years, been offering hepatitis C positive lungs to patients. But because of a recent drug that was being used to cure hepatitis C, they had, consulted a bunch of doctors in Toronto. They consulted infectious disease doctors, et cetera. And they were confident that, first of all, they could basically guarantee that I would get Hep C if I took the lungs. And second of all, they were confident that they would be able to cure the hepatitis C using a treatment with this drug, and that it would basically not affect me.
Is that the case? You do not have?
Yeah, and so that's the case. So basically what happened was they kind of explained all that stuff to us, and they gave me a half an hour to decide.
No big deal.
Yeah, no big deal. We'll come back in a half an hour, and you need to tell us if you are going to take these lungs or not. And if you are, you'll be going into surgery at 4:00 today. So we had to talk about it, but to fast forward and answer your question, yes. Once I was out of transplant, once I was in recovery, they once they found hepatitis C in my blood and they could, prove it in the lab test that it was there, they were able to use this newer drug called Harvoni to treat the hepatitis C. I was on the drug for, I believe, 12 weeks. And I took it, I can't remember, it's just a pill that I would swallow. I think it was once a day or something like that. Once or twice a day, once a day, I think. And yes, and it was interesting because as I was on the drug, they would check my blood and they call it the viral count in my blood work was going down.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so we could actually tell that it was, working. And then after, I think I finished the drug after 12 weeks. And then 2 months after that, they did kind of the final, all the blood work to check everything, make sure everything was good. And I was cleared of hepatitis C.
I think that is extraordinary. And, also I'm wondering, do you know anything personal about your donor? I think it's so extraordinary to be a donor. I'm a donor. All my listeners, if you're not donors, go be donors.
Yes,
We
please.
wanna save lives of people like Cassandra. But of course, the sad part of being the recipient of a donor is that someone has to lose their life to
Yes. Yeah.
to be in most cases. There are some donors that can be living donors. And if you're out there, I really want to interview. So come find me.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be awesome.
Do you know anything about your donor or your donor's family? Is there any
Yeah, I don't as of right now. Basically, I knew kind of all the medical facts. I'm pretty sure I was told that it was a female. And then the kind of age range I was told. So that was, I'm trying to remember, I think they said 25 to 35 or something like that.
Okay.
So closer to my age. And that was it, really. I do have the option to write a letter to the donor's family. There's a process, kind of an anonymous process you can go through to have that sent to them. And then it is basically up to them and up to you if you want to actually, connect on a more personal level or, outside of just the kind of healthcare system.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I haven't done that yet. I haven't written the letter yet. It's one of those things where I know that I'm probably going to at some point, but it just hasn't felt right yet.
Yeah.
So I know it's
under no obligation to do that, of course. I'm just curious.
Right. Yeah. No, it's something that I get asked a lot. And so, yeah, it is one of those things where confidentiality and privacy is a huge thing. And so, but because I'm receiving, organs, I have to know all the health, the medical facts about the donor. And so that is something that they tell you right away, but anything that's kind of relevant to you. And then after that, it's kind of up to you and to their family and that kind of thing. And then, I'm grateful that they do have the option to write a letter. And that's something that I do plan on doing in the future when I'm ready.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing to have.
I think that's an nice full circle when you're ready to do that. So what was recovery like after getting a double lung transplant?
Right. Recovery was one of the hardest things, probably the hardest thing I've ever done. There were a lot of ups and downs. There was a lot of frustration. There was a lot of feeling like no progress was being made. There was a lot of complications that would pop up. And it's very uncomfortable. So it was hard, and you're kind of caught between this kind of amazing, wow, I can breathe and I don't actually need the oxygen.
Right. What was that first deep breath like?
Yeah, it was great. It took a lot of work to get there. Because I was on, I was a rare case because I woke up shortly after the surgery. And then I had the ventilator down my throat for, I believe it was 8 days.
Whoa, that sounds awful.
Yeah, and I was awake that whole time. And so that was extremely uncomfortable. And so what they did basically was they were being very cautious with me about taking me off the ventilator. And so what they decided to do after finally 8 days of me still being on it and being extremely uncomfortable and anxious about it, they ended up putting a trach in my throat.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and so that was how they transitioned me off the ventilator. And so when they did that, I was very grateful, as much as you don't really want to trach. I was extremely grateful to have the ventilator out of my throat and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And it was funny, and I've talked to other transplant recipients, lung transplant recipients, is you still think you need the oxygen. And then you
Right.
kind of, it takes you a while to kind of like realize, okay, I don't need to keep putting this on. Like I'm okay.
We're such creatures of habit, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly. So it takes a little bit to kind of realize, oh, like I can do this on my own. I don't need this anymore, kind of thing.
Now that you have your new lungs, how does cystic fibrosis affect you? Since you still have it, but it's a lung disease. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the CF mostly affects my digestive system right now, because obviously I only had the lungs transplanted. So my guts and my pancreas and all that are still my original parts.
Right. Right.
And so I still have to take enzymes to help me digest food before I eat meals. And so that's still a part of me. I still have to keep a close eye on making sure everything's working right with my stomach and my gut. And then really as far as the lungs are concerned and the transplant stuff, now it's all my post-transplant medication is all pills that I just swallow.
Okay.
So I have completely eliminated the kind of morning, evening routine that I had done for my entire life. That whole treatment routine has been eliminated from my life. I don't have to worry about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy how much, like, I don't know, for the first while it was so weird. I didn't know what to do with my time in the morning anymore.
How long has it been since the transplant?
I had the transplant on November 22nd of 2016. So
Okay,
it's been
year and a half-ish.
Year and a half. Yeah.
Not quite. So in a year and a half, you met your long distance boyfriend in person and then got married.
Yeah.
And you started a business.
Yes. Yeah, we did. Yeah. Yeah. I got married. Actually, we just celebrated our 1-year anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. And you started a business. Tell us just a little bit about your business.
I kind of have, two things going. One is called Cunningham Creative Services, and it's named after my grandmother. And it's a freelance writing business. So I'm doing like content writing, various types of copywriting, that kind of thing, and offering those. I really like working with small business owners and entrepreneurs to be able to write in a way that kind of supports their brand and their ideas and helps people find out about them.
Yeah, it's great work as an owner and entrepreneur. I am so grateful for copywriter help. I tell you that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's been one of the things I've been working on. And the second thing I've been working on is a blog that I'm hoping to launch in the next couple months. And I decided to name it Girl Seeking Joy. And that is something that I've been working away at since, probably since I got home after transplant. I've been working on that. Yeah. And the reason behind that blog is because I realized after transplant that something that I'm struggling with and I continue to struggle with is sort of a fear of joy, which people might wonder what the heck that means.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Basically just that growing up and with something as unpredictable as CF, where you kind of never know, when like a chest infection is going to pop up, or when I'm going to lose weight all of a sudden, or, all these different things that can kind of pop up, at a moment's notice. It kind of became a theme of, things are going really smoothly, I was just enjoying things, or I was like getting really excited about something that was coming up in my future. I was, going to go on this trip, or I was going to do this thing, and then all of a sudden something would pop up and go wrong with the CF.
So it was fear of disappointment.
Yeah. And then it would kind of feel like that was, the kind of all the worry and anxiety and stress about the health issue was kind of replacing the joy and excitement I'd had, or that kind of thing. And so I kind of have realized that after transplant, that's something that I want to work on, is just kind of letting go of that and just taking time to enjoy the here and now and not worry about, if something goes wrong tomorrow, or, that kind of thing.
I love that.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, this is something that's close to me because being someone with CF, which is, like we said, a progressive disease with no cure, you kind of are forced to get a little dark, you're forced to face your mortality from a fairly young age, right? Sure. That this is, a pretty big deal. And so I obviously am pretty passionate about this message. And I kind of want to encourage other people to realize, like, joy shouldn't be something you put off until you feel like you've earned it, or you've completed this to-do list, or, things like that, or you should put off because you're worried it's going to go away. It's it's preparing for the kind of, moment that it might go away. That's not a really great way to live.
No, it's not. And I know that, Cassandra, you're a fan of the show, and we always talk about celebration. And to me, I
Yeah.
think those things are very entwined.
Yes. Yeah.
Joy, that celebration of all of the different parts of your life is so crucial. And I love that message. The idea that you shouldn't let fear get in your way of joy is such a beautiful, beautiful concept. How do you celebrate? How do you jump into this joy? Or maybe that is how you celebrate.
Yeah. It's still, like I said, it's something that I'm still working on, because I tend to still, get caught up because, even though I feel a lot better than I ever have, there's still, potential for things to go wrong. So I still struggle with that. But my husband is actually, I have to credit him because he's really good at reminding me, to take in the small moments, the simple moments, and to, stop and actually reflect on them and to enjoy them. And so he's really great about that. I think I celebrate by spending time with others. And I also am a person who's always enjoyed her solitude. So I like to go for walks by myself or spend time by myself reading or things like that, and just have some quiet time for myself. That's another, I think, way that I celebrate.
Those are nice ways to celebrate. I think people discredit the value of those. I truly do. The quiet solitude moments, those moments with yourself where you just stop and reflect. I think it's a wonderful way to celebrate.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree.
So I'm curious, at what point you've been through all of this, and I could make a speculation, but I'm wondering, at what point in your life did you feel the bravest?
Well, oh my goodness. I don't know if I really felt brave, but I would say probably the biggest things were kind of probably making the decision to move forward with our the relationship with my husband, given kind of all of the things going against us. That was one of them, and then the second one was making the decision essentially to accept the lungs that I was offered. I did not feel brave at all in the moment.
Right.
Because it was pretty much pure fear at that point and anxiety.
But it didn't win. I always say fear either owns you or empowers you. And It didn't own you, sister.
Yeah, no, I love that you say that. I've heard you say that now. And I totally agree. I have always been known to be an extremely stubborn person.
I love it. It comes out in the most magic ways, doesn't it? That stubbornness really pulls through for us when we really need it to.
Definitely.
I love that. So as we come to the close of the show, and there's so much more we could share, I'm so grateful to you for sharing all of this with us. One of my favorite elements of the show is asking each guest what their favorite charitable organization is to support. And I imagine there are probably a number of different ones that are super moving to you, but which one is your favorite?
Yeah, so the obvious ones for me are Cystic Fibrosis. So for your Canadian listeners, it's Cystic Fibrosis Canada. And then in the US, it's the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation.
Awesome. Thank you. We do have a large Canadian contingency, so I'm glad we could share that.
Yeah, awesome.
And the CF Foundation has come up in other ways in other places. So as always, I ask each of you listeners to help build awareness. Go check out their website, look them up on Instagram. We'll tag them. We'll give them Charity of the Week. But we want you to know more about what they do. If you have anything to give, money, time, anything, give it to the organization. Each week we bring something to you, and I charge you with empowering yourself and your community to learn more about different organizations. So Cassandra, thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, I'm so glad you do that.
Thanks. I love it. I absolutely, absolutely love it. So can you share your 3 words with us one last time?
Stubborn, identity, and joy.
So stubborn, I get, because we just talked about that and I love it. And certainly joy, I get. Tell me about identity. Not that I don't get it, but what does that mean to you?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, the identity piece comes in with all of the kind of stuff that comes with being somebody with a chronic illness for your whole life. You kind of tend to take on different identities that, you're always the sick girl or, things like that. So trying to kind of separate yourself from that. And then after transplant, I really felt like being able to breathe again and being able to participate in my life more and have a better quality of life. It felt like I was getting back to myself, getting back to who I was inside, and not the kind of sick version of myself that I was on oxygen.
So much of your journey is about figuring out who you are, what your identity is. Who is Cassandra, not the sick kid or the woman getting the transplant, but you as a whole person.
Right, exactly.
I love that. I'm so grateful that you came onto the show to share your story with us. I think that your drive and your energy is such an inspiration. And I particularly love your sharing with us that you were so afraid of joy and how you've decided that life is too short to be afraid of joy. I hope everybody takes that with them and find joy in every tiny aspect of your day. Do you have a gratitude practice?
I do. Yeah. I write down 3 things I'm grateful for every day.
Yeah, I do as well. And I love that. It keeps me super duper grounded. So thank you so much, Cassandra, for coming on and sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be able to do it.
All right. And to you, my dear listeners, thank you for being here. I am so grateful to you for being on this journey with me. I hope you're enjoying the show. I hope you are sharing it with your friends, helping me spread the word. I'm counting on you. This is Heather Vickery, folks. I hope you tune in next Thursday for a brand new episode. And as always, choose bravely.
The Brave Files is proudly supported by Lost Format Apparel, a socially conscious clothing company. You already know that homelessness is a huge problem. Over 500,000 Americans are living without shelter and millions more without consistent access to everyday basics. My friends at Lost Format know that solving homelessness is a much larger problem than any one company or person can solve on their own. It requires teamwork, sacrifice, strength, and building communities through personal and professional relationships. And isn't that exactly what the Brave Files podcast is all about? That's why I'm proud to say that the Brave Files has partnered with Lost Format, and together we're working to change the face of consumerism in addressing homelessness. You can now get one of 2 fantastic shirts custom designed specifically for the Brave Files. Each order goes towards providing necessities to the homeless. We have one shirt that, of course, says "Choose Bravely," and another that reminds you that brave is always greater than fearless. Head on over to vickeryandco.com/store to see both beautiful shirts and to check out the entire product line from Lost Format. All of their stuff is super soft and comfortable and has an amazing fit. Use promo code BRAVE to get 10% off of your Brave Files custom t-shirts. And if you have an order over $30, your shipping is free. I choose bravely to take the plunge to help solve homelessness. Are you with me?
Thank you for listening to The Brave Files. Be sure to visit thebravefilespodcast.com to access the show notes and discover fantastic bonus content. Music composed and produced by Matt Lewis of Union Music, LLC.
Special thanks to our editor and audio mix expert, Andrew Olson. I am eternally grateful for all that he does to make each week sound so fantastic. You can hear more of Andrew's work at findandrewolson.com.